Welcome to episode 22 of What If I Don't Like It? If you're listening on a podcast only app, you might notice that the runtime is a little shorter than normal. And if you're listening and watching on YouTube, you might notice that this isn't just a still of the art for this episode. I'm here with my whole body and face. I recorded video for this. And that's two reasons. Both of those things that are going on are because I had to push back my guest for this episode. I really want to bring you From Dusk Till Dawn with my sister Kristen because they haven't seen it and I haven't seen it. And I need to see it for movie night extravaganza. They have little kids. They have a life. They are a nurse to special ed kids at his school. Their life is not conducive to podcasting at any moment. I will get them. And we will watch the movie together in real life, which I don't always get to do with a guest. And then I will be able to record that and bring it to you the first of next month. But since I've got to bump it, I'm going to give you a little bit of a different episode. It's going to be just me, hence the video, and hence why it is shorter, talking to you about Over the Garden Wall, which is a TV series that I didn't see for the longest time and then finally did. And that's what If I Don't Like It is about. So let's just take a moment at the top here. And since we're doing video, there might be a lot of people who are new to this podcast. It's getting recommended to them because it's got video in it. And normally this podcast is just my voice and an image, and that might not be super attractive to the algorithm. So a lot of people might not have seen it. But this is, in fact, episode 22 of this show. So if you dig the concept that I'm about to give you, there are 21 other episodes where we do a whole plethora of different kinds of movies. This show, What If I Don't Like It, comes around on the basic idea that we have hangups on movies that we haven't even seen because we think we know what they might be, or maybe we just don't like the genre, maybe we just don't like the director or the lead actor or whatever weird thing. Maybe you had a friend who was way too pushy about seeing it, and so you just kind of fought back out of spite. All these reasons get discussed in the first half. So I find someone to talk to who maybe is in the film industry or maybe just is really awesome to talk to and has a bias against a movie that I really like. We talk to them about why that is, why they haven't seen it, what their general likes for movies are. I usually ask them what their top 4 is so I can get an idea of what they're into. Then we take a break. They go watch the movie. And then we record again after they've seen the movie. I hype them up a little bit before the movie begins in part 1. And then in part 2, we see, did it work? Spoiler alert, it doesn't always work. And sometimes guests will come back on a later episode and challenge me to watch something that they adore that I thought I knew but have not yet seen. That's the basic premise of what this show is about. So, if you're interested in it and you want to hear more, go ahead and look in the playlist that will be associated with this and catch more of my episodes. We do a lot of different movies, some fun ones like, oh God, Point Break, Network, So I Married an Axe Murderer, Ice Pirates, Jingle All the Way, Green Inferno, It Follows. Tons of fun, tons of guests. Now, let me also introduce myself because maybe you don't totally know who I am. Maybe you've just seen my pink hair floating into your algorithms on YouTube Shorts or TikTok or Instagram. But my name is Katie Baldassaro. I am a actress, writer, director, film critic, person who can't stop telling everybody about movie trivia anyway, so you might as well let me do it in a format that isn't just me bothering people at the bank. I have made a little film called Girl in the Basement. I really love it. It is, again, going to be easy for you to access by the playlist here. It is completely free and fully available on YouTube. It is an allegory for anorexia and the kind of personality that would be attracted to that, told through the genre of body horror. So do be aware. This is a 34-minute short horror film that gets pretty graphic. I mean, you're going to have to be 18 plus to be able to see it. YouTube has decided. I made it with somebody named Jared Skolnick, who is a director, writer as well, cinematographer. I absolutely adore him. You should check out all of his work. Easily available on YouTube as well. You'll find some of it in the shorts playlist that I have on my channel here. Also had Robert Savage, who is a cinematographer and sound designer, and Alex Krakauer, and then Alex Squires, who you might know from Opinions May Vary, a very popular podcast that's not retired. You can see him on the Last of Us episode, which is also one that we have done on this show. He did the special effects because there's some fun special effects. It was inspired by my love of Ravenous, which is a cannibal horror movie, if you want to get a little wink wink as to why this kind of body horror might get a little intense for you. Other than that, you might have seen me in a ton of weird horror movies throughout my time. I've done B-horror movies, local low-budget horror movies, background to every movie that I could get my hands on in the Boston area where I'm currently located. I played the woman with the face painted on her, the flag painted on her face in Purge election year. Got a billboard out of that, so you might recognize me from that. You might also recognize me from Movie Night Extravaganza. I am a co-host of that show, along with Conan Neutron, Christina Oakes, and Forrest Miller. That is weekly, although in October we're doing a lot of double weekly episodes. And this coming Tuesday, the 15th, which is actually going to be the day that this comes out. So today, we've got Bonnie Burton and Lauren Chouinard talking to us about Lost Boys because they lived in the Santa Cruz area where it was filmed. And so they've got some good lore to accompany the general discussion of the film. Movie Night Extravaganza, we pick a new film every week and we talk about it. This month is all vampire themed, so we've got a lot of good ones coming at you. At the end of the week, we're also going to have Bonnie again and talking about what we do in the shadows, which it's so great. You had to put a comedy in there, and that was comedy vampirism at its best. We also have Abigail coming up, and like I said, From Dusk Till Dawn, which I have still not yet seen. I'm going to watch it with my sister. We didn't see it because we almost watched it with our brother when we were much, much younger, and it got to the Cheech Marin scene where he goes, kitty, 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 paraphrased, and didn't get to the third kitty before my brother decided that maybe we would not watch that movie. And we still haven't. So we'll discuss all of that on that episode, which will be the next episode. So it'll be episode 23 that comes out on the 1st of November. I think that really does it for things you might know me from. If you're in the East Hampton area, I'm also going to be doing a live showing of Nosferatu at the New City Brewery. That's going to be part of the East Hampton Film Festival, and you can see that in the liner notes as well. If you follow me on Instagram at Little Deadly Creature, if you follow me on TikTok as Movie Runtime, all of this stuff is like in the link in bio, in the everything constantly. The ads are going to show up, how to get tickets to those kinds of things, although that Nosferatu event is totally free. We're also going to show some local films, some short horror films, it'll be an hour short horror films, and then break to talk about that, introduce Nosferatu, which is an hour and a half long. And that's the whole night. It's free. Come support East Hampton Film Festival, find out what we're about, all that good stuff. And without any further ado, let's get into the next part of the show. Why didn't I see Over the Garden Wall? So this is the part of the show where I would normally say to the guest, what's up? Why haven't you seen this film? What were your prejudices about it? Or in this case, television show, which we did once with The Last of Us because my friend Alex really, really was not willing to watch that show. And it is so good that after he watched just one episode, the Nick Offerman Murray episode, obviously fell in love and watched all of it right away. So that was a huge success. This show, Over the Garden Wall, wow, I think it came out in 2014. This is where I also tell you at the end of the show, we do a quick trivia dive at the end and correct anything that I might have said wrong in the middle of the show. So if I say something wrong right now and you're like, jump over to the corrections and omissions and trivia at the end and I might correct myself. But right now, so I don't have to like edit a bunch of times and see me type and everything, I'm going to say it was like 2014 that this came out. And I do know that it had a like precursor shorter, like 9-minute film called The Tomb of the Unknown, which I also didn't manage to see. And I think that came out more in the like 2009 era. And that's quite simply because I had just graduated college and I was busy working as a waitress as much as I possibly could and just did not have cable. I didn't have Cartoon Network, and that was what it had aired on as a part of like experimental shorts. Why did I see it in 2014? I didn't hear about it. I didn't grow up watching Adventure Time. To date, I've only seen a few episodes of Adventure Time, which I like, but it kind of has this weird, I don't even know what the word to use. You know, when you're trying to describe Monty Python's humor, and it's chaotic and it's strange and it's different, and it either hits with you very much so, or you just can't stand it. You just hate it. Personally, I love Monty Python, but tons of people I know are like, that's the way that is formatted. It doesn't work for me. And so while I love Adventure Time, sometimes it becomes just a little too cutesy and a little too weird, to the point of almost, if there was a version of me thinks the lady doth protest too much with absurdity, that would be the line that it was working. And I just have a prejudice against it. I'm sorry. I love a lot of aspects to it. I love making bacon pancakes. I love the jokes people make out of it, but I just can't find myself sitting down because it was such a short format show as well. So this miniseries has a couple episodes, 10 episodes that are 12 minutes each. And my brain is not that of someone who consumes quick, short stuff like that. For me, I would have just been like, make it an hour and 20 long minute, and I would just watch the movie. That's fine for me. So I thought like, oh, this must not be for my attention span, because sometimes when I watched episodes of Adventure Time, it felt like I was on crack cocaine and things are just quick, fast moving. And I have a little bit of a like agita, like sensory agita that gets too much color, too much light, too much movement, too much quickness, too much absurdity. Like if there was a Baroque weirdness of a person's personality, could be too intricate for my senses to handle. He also did the Guillermo del Toro Pinocchio. This is Patrick McHale, the creator of Adventure Time and also of Over the Garden Wall. And I can't watch that. I love Guillermo del Toro, but it's just such a high-pitched kid voice, kid forward, that I don't really like the Pinocchio story. So I have a lot of like, I don't like this guy. I don't think I like this guy. When I found out that it even existed, it was from someone that I was working with, and they had quite possibly the most unique way to have watched this, and I do deeply feel for them. And if you know already what Over the Garden Wall is all about, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, that's just that guy, though. They had a younger sibling pass away in an accident where they were both playing, and they were the older brother, and their younger brother passed away in front of them, and they could not save them or stop them from the accident. Which is literally what we have in this story, except that Wirt and Greg survive. Theoretically, spoiler alert, we'll talk about that in a second. And so this was a very deep, meaningful piece of art for this person. And the way that they showed it to me or expressed it to me was just too much. They made it seem like it was really, really sad. Very intensely sad. And it was for them. And with the retrospect of what was going on, I can see what they were talking about. And it probably helped them deal with their grief a lot. But I didn't think I wanted to sit down for something that was made and written by someone who usually doesn't produce something that I like, that was in a short form format, which is not something that I like, to be made to cry a lot. It really just seemed like can you tell me one reason I might want to watch it? And they're like, oh, there's also a lot of singing. And I was like, oh, I also hate that. And then they said, don't worry, it's like Betty Boop early Looney Tunes style cartoon and singing. And I was like, I hate that. I hate everything you're describing. And it's okay that you like it, but I'm just gonna, no, thank you. So I didn't. I just didn't. And I continued to not for like 6 or 8 years. And then I started working with someone who really, really likes this. And you can listen to her talk on a couple of different episodes because it's Ariel Faye Folds. She came on episode 2 for Bad Boys, which neither of us had seen, and she was a good sport about that. Then she came on and talked about Spaceman with our other good friend, Sarah Fraser. And then she challenged me, and I watched The Emperor's New Groove, which is a movie that she really, really loved. So when she said, this is worth it, this is something that I watch every year, and I find really whimsical, fun, beautiful, a little bit dark, but not so dark that I can't enjoy it because Ariel does not watch horror movies. Although, bless her, she saw Alien Romulus with me, so her horizons are getting bigger. I had to stop and say, well, you're not some weird emo guy that I work with who is a little bit extra about everything. You're someone with a very good taste and usually don't like things that are maudlin or even super scary. And I thought that this was like really, really dark. And she said, well, would you do me the favor of coming over to my house and watching it with me because it's only 120 minutes and I own it. Twist my arm. I love hanging out with Ariel. Very easy to do, very easy sell. So I come over and she starts to tell me more things about this. She starts to name people who are in it, doing the voices. And I said, I like Monty Python. Well, John Cleese is in this. I was really into and still into Yellow Jackets. Well, Melanie Linsky is in this. Elijah Wood is one of the main characters. I love Lord of the Rings, and even if I didn't love Lord of the Rings, who doesn't love Elijah Wood? And he doesn't have to do much right now. Like he's got enough money to pick the things he wants to do. So to see him pick to do this, that gave me pause. That made me think, wow, this might actually be quite good. There's also BB Newirth, surprised voice there. And Tom Lennon from The State. You'll always get me to watch something that Tom Lennon is in, or Ken Marino. He's not in this, but you could throw Ken Marino and Joe Chiglio and just about anything, and you'll get me in it as well. And so many more voices. And so I started to think, like, I'm probably wrong. I'm probably really, 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 really wrong. I'm still scared about the format, and I'm still scared about the singing, because if you listen to me on Movie Night Extravaganza, I'm a little bit halfway between Christina, who is a full theater kid, full musical, can quote all of Wicked, can tell you everything about anyone who's ever been in a production, and Conan Neutron, who actively covers his ears and doesn't want to talk about either of those things. They're hosts on Movie Night Extravaganza, and Conan has been on my show a bunch of times. We did Network together, we did Moonstruck together. So it's a real gamble to see if I'm going to like this. But Hari doesn't usually lead me wrong, so I gave it a roll. And now this is usually where we'll cut. And you'll have to wait till the next part to see. Did I enjoy it? Well, I would say that, normally you have to wait to the second part to see if I would enjoy it, but you kind of know, because I introduced at the beginning that I did really enjoy this. It's great. It is so whimsical, so festive. If you want a fall movie, if you want something to say, God, let's just sit down and get ready for Halloween, but without actually having to be a Halloween heavy specific movie, it does take place in our timeline in Halloween. Little spoiler alerts again. I guess at this point, when you get to the second half of What If You Don't Like It, you have to be ready for spoilers. We don't put spoilers in the first part because the guest has not yet seen the movie, but in the second part, we do include spoilers. So this part, if you haven't seen Over the Garden Wall, go watch it. It's on Hulu still, even though HBO Max pulled it off. It is on Hulu. And on November 4th, they're having their 10th anniversary, and they're going to have a 2-minute claymation from Aardman Studios, the people who did Wallace and Gromit. I know that Ari and I are beyond excited, and we'll be getting together on that day and watching the whole thing again. And that's a little celebration for ourselves. We might dress up a little because who doesn't need a reason to dress up? So moving forward, there will be spoilers as we discuss Over the Garden Wall, which I did adore. I did not find it to be super, super sad, although it is ultimately about death, grief, longing, moving on, what it means to be human, the pressures of feeling obligated to another human being who is in your family or someone that you take care of, like, and I know there's someone on this app who claims to have been the first person to have noticed the allegories between this piece and Dante's Inferno, but you know, it's impossible to watch it without noticing. I mean, there's 10 chapters, and like the last one is in realities, and 9 rings. The beast is obviously the devil. Beatrice is the bird's name who guides them through, and Beatrice is who they are looking for in Dante's Inferno, which has a poet. Like, I mean, go watch that guy's video because he lays it all out. It takes like 35 minutes, but also like, you know, if you've read the book or if you have like read the Spark Notes, it's going to be there. Like there's some stuff in here where the allegory is a little bit deeper and you might not know it if you don't know the source material, but then there's stuff like the episode in Potter's Field, like, I'm sorry, in Pottsfield, the name of the town, which is obviously a potter's field. And maybe you don't know what a potter's field is, but a potter's field is where they would bury poor people or people without any kind of names that they didn't know. And so like a potter's field is full of skeletons. So the reveal on that episode to find out that everyone is dead and that they're digging up skeletons might be a reveal for some people. And I think for a lot of other adults, it would kind of just be like, yeah, oh yeah, I kind of knew that everyone in Pottsfield would be dead. But, you know, it doesn't take anything away from it because the larger conceit of why they're in this place is not yet established. You don't really feel that coming forward, although, you know, it's like watching The Sixth Sense and then watching it again. If you're watching it again, everything's definitely put in a light where you could tell that that's happening. And that's actually because they had originally thought about filming this series backwards or changing the order in episodes so that you would find out that Wirt and Greg were descended into a world that was not actually reality because of an accident that may or may not end up well for them. I totally love the fact that they moved that to the back end and we just enter right into this world haphazardly because our protagonists don't know what's happening to them any more than we do. So it doesn't need exposition. We can just be there with them. It makes it feel more adult than, say, having it just handed directly to us. I really, really like that about this. You know, they did also talk about in some of the like trivia that I read that it was going to be entirely on a train and that because they almost get hit by a train at the end when they jump into the water. And it would have been them fighting to get off the train and then realizing they needed to get back on the train because the train was actually trying to bring them to life, bring them back to life. And that the conductor, which would have still been the beast, was not supposed to be evil, but just like trying to help them move on, trying to get them back on the thing. I don't really like that nearly as much as what they wound up with, which is probably why they wound up with what they wound up with. It's more compelling to have the beast be an actual kind of evil villain incarnate of Beelzebub, especially if we're talking about this being a Dante's Inferno. I do really enjoy, though, that ultimately there isn't a lot of super scary high stakes. Each episode is kind of a misunderstanding, and we are scared of the misunderstanding. We are scared of the unknown. And then once we know what it is, it can be dealt with, it can be gotten over, there can be resolve for everyone. My sister asked, could I show this to my kids? Because it seems like a really great tradition to start, and it seems like a really great fall activity, fall movie. And I wasn't sure because, spoiler alert again, I'm not very good with kids knowing what kids should watch. I don't have children, and I watch a lot of graphic horror movies and stuff like that. So I watched it again with that kind of thought in mind. The 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, could they watch this? The one episode that really does kind of skirt that line between like, oh, nothing really malevolent is happening here, it's kind of always just a misunderstanding, is the Auntie Whispers one with Lorna. And Lorna, when she transforms into the demon that is trying to kill the boys, that would live rent free in my little head for the rest of my life. There are the little scary stories books with the drawings that everyone my age had that they tried to unsuccessfully make into a movie. They're like, oh yeah, I should not have been allowed to look at those. I can still picture a lot of them in my head right now, but like we put that in the freezer to keep it away from us. We buried it in the closet to keep it away from us. It definitely messed us up. My husband has the dust witch coming at you from the Ray Bradbury story that they made into a movie, burned in his mind because he saw that maybe just a little too young. So it really felt like that's a dust witch situation. So if you have little kids and you're thinking about showing this to them, I do think it's a very inspired by Grimm's fairy tales kind of vignette situation, and it's short form and kids like that, and they might like the animation because it's similar to Adventure Time and things that they've seen, and it's got singing. Just skip the episode with Auntie Whispers when you're watching it with them. Watch it yourself, because that's where Tim Curry is going to be, and he's always delivers, always delivers. And it is a wonderful episode, but keep that away from maybe you're under 13, I guess might be what I would say, unless you've got a pretty spicy 13-year-old. There are some 10-year-olds I think that could probably handle that, but that'll be my warning there. What about the singing, Katie? What if I told you I loved it? What if I told you I loved every single bit of it? Even a little bit. Potatoes and molasses, which should be so, I'll give you a Richard Nixon, so annoying. And yet, I loved it. I loved it. It's really impressive how they have Greg be cutesy and be naive. He doesn't wind up being like a minion or an annoying child that just has this shrill quality of interjection, and yet he's so random. He very, very much reminded me of Gurr from Invader Zim, who I adore, and I think that's why he worked for me. He felt like literary the idiot. He felt like that kind of character that is on its face value, naive and stupid and unaware of what is going on, but at a deeper level might actually be the most aware of what is going on and the most capable of handling what life actually has to be giving us. And that's hard to do with a character that's supposed to be as young as Wirt is. I think he might be like 6 or 8. I'm not good with kids, and I'm definitely not good with kids that are little animated children. So the voice acting on that was also great. They had a kid. That's actually the one actor in the whole thing that's actually a kid. And he does it fantastically. And when he sings Potatoes and Molasses, it's fantastic. And when he comes up with name after name after name for that damn frog, I'm grinning ear to ear. So it's not that sad. It's not that unbearably maudlin, downbeat, dark, gray, blah. I mean, it is a subdued color palette, which I appreciate because, like I said, when I watched Adventure Time, it was a lot of sensory overload. Overload. Sensory overload might be a good band name. Take that, anybody who wants it, it's yours. So this was really wonderful to get to step into and feel like it's more of a children's fairy tale of a Beatrix Potter, especially in the episode where the little animals are being taught to play music. That's the episode that's going to have Tom Lennon in it. It just had so much whimsy in such a unique and genuine and earnest way that you can't be angry at it. You can't be grinchy at it. You can't hate it. It almost has this enduring holiday quality about it that makes you want to watch it year after year. And I hate holiday movies. This movie plays directly into every trope of everything that I shouldn't like, and yet I want to watch it every single year. I'm going to watch it multiple times this year alone. And I want to know more and more about every single bit of trivia that I can find out about it because it's so interesting to me. You can watch it once, twice, multiple times and get different angles and different understandings. Obviously, I think that's true of most media, and media literacy is different for each person. But you can come back to this again and again and notice nuances and notice differences. And even in just the intro part, watching it multiple times, I started to notice there were inclusions of characters that you'd see later on. There were little nods to things that you'd see later on. There are nods to things that are cut out. Like on the third or fourth time I watched it, I realized Fred the horse is stolen at the location where they meet the highwayman, who sings that really crazy old like bluesy jazz song where he comes at the camera. The animation in this is so interesting and different. How could it be so old-timey and yet so different and so new and so fun? Highwayman is someone who steals from people on the road. What is the first thing we find out about Ed the horse? He wants to steal. Is it possible that Ed the horse was the highwayman's horse and that Wart stole a horse from a thief? I don't know. It's in there. It could be. And the more you watch, the more those things are going to start to come out and come clear to you. The house where we first meet the woodsman who's churning the Edelweiss into oil, and the beast turns into that dog. We see the dog in the beginning with the young woman in the Regency wear, and then we see it again. We notice that that woman is Beatrice. We know that the house that the woodsman is in is actually Beatrice's house, but she's lost that because she's been turned into a blue jay or a bluebird. So there's just so much you can delve into. It's so deep. It's so interesting. It's so fun. I really recommend that you check it out. And it is very little time to consume it. If you wanted to do it at 12 minutes each and take breaks in between, you could. If you wanted to sit down, it's an hour and 20 minutes. Sorry, it's 2 hours, it's 120 minutes. And that is not very much longer than any other movie out there. Most movies are much longer. In fact, like, it's 2 episodes of Penguin. You know, it's doable for my Metalocalypse fans out there. I really, really enjoyed the episode with Greg's Frog, where he finally talks for the very first time and he sings that song. It is incredibly enchanting, and I got goosebumps because I had a personal connection to this. I know I made fun of my coworker at the beginning who enjoyed this because they had a personal connection, but the voice was strangely familiar and I couldn't quite place it. And then I realized, and I'm going to have to tell you the name in the end because I don't fully remember the name right now, through looking it up, I was like, whose voice is that? Why do I recognize it so much? That performer actually was in American Hustle. And so was I as a background performer. And in the scene that I was in was the scene that he was in, and he was performing, and it was a week-long shoot. So boy, did I hear that voice, and boy, did I recognize that person. It was really, really fun. So I can understand enjoying something a little bit more, although my connection is not traumatic and life-altering, so I can enjoy that a lot more. That would probably be my favorite episode, right next to the Pottsfield episode, because I do love Chris Isaac, who voices the big giant pumpkin head that winds up being a cat. Also something that I adore. There's nothing to dislike about that episode. His voice is fantastic. It's really fun, and it's the first kind of it's right at the beginning, so you start to feel the whimsy of what they're talking about with that kind of like, oh my god, is this going to be really terrible, really kind of kind of whimsical, and you get strapped in for what's going to be a great ride. My least favorite episode, that's a really hard one for me to pick. I think that at points in time, the Endicott episode lags a little bit for me, which has John Cleese in it. I did also forget things you notice when you continue to watch it. I did notice that when they're on top of when they're in the graveyard in the flashback to our current time period with Greg and Wirt, he's leaning on a gravestone that says Endicott. So, he might actually be a ghost. The question is he a ghost? Is she a ghost? Maybe they're both ghosts. Maybe they're both dead. Something else that could arise there. It's still a fun episode. I just think it's a little bit long. Not my favorite one. Doesn't really add very much flavor to the whole thing, which does end with that kind of question, this sort of feeling like, is this guy real? Is this guy not real? Is this real? Is this happening? This isn't happening. Because at the very end, you have the frog on the piano who turns to us and says, these are these beautiful lies that we tell ourselves. And then you want to ask, like, is this whole story a beautiful lie that we're telling ourselves because it's much better than knowing that these kids didn't survive? Of course, the coda shows you that they do, so I'm not sure why that's thrown in there, except to just kind of give you a little, like, I don't know. And when they talk to the showrunner, he definitely says, like, it ends with them living. I usually ask the guest in this part of the show, did they like the media that we consumed? It's a little bit funny to get it here again, because by this point we've been talking for 2 hours, so you definitely know their opinion on it. It's just something I like to wrap it up with a bow. So I asked them, did they like it? I did like it. I very genuinely did like it, which I didn't think I was going to. And then I'll ask them, would they recommend it to other people? And if there's any caveats on recommending it to other people. And for this, I would say, I recommend that everyone check it out. If you are like me and you think you're not going to like this stuff, it's really enjoyable, despite all of the hangups that I have. If you're hearing me describe these kinds of things and you're like, I love singing, I love whimsy, I love dark fantasy, then yeah, you're going to get all of that. So you should check it out too. It's technically considered comedic fantasy, although if I had to describe it without looking up what it is labeled, I would have said like horror fantasy. It is, I guess, a lot more funny in the genre that they pick. They don't want to put horror on it. It's kind of just a little dark. It doesn't have a lot of capital H horror. I would tell you, maybe don't watch the Anti-Whispers episode if you wanted to watch this with the full family. Although, genuinely, if you're going to show something to your kids, watch it first. Just watch it first. You know who knows best what your kids can handle? You. So don't come to my comment section and tell me that you show this to your 4-year-old and you were like, I didn't care. We watched Anti-Whispers. No, I'm not paying for anybody's therapy bill. You done messed up. And then I asked them if they have any final thoughts or anything else that they want to add before we end. And I don't. I think that that's it for this little bit right here. I'm going to cut back in and give you the corrections, omissions, deep dives, trivia bit at the end. So we'll get a little bit more tangential stuff to talk about, and I'll give you a little bit of trivia for this show. And now we're on to the part that I call corrections and omissions. And this is because normally when I do this show, I'm having a conversation with another person, the guest for that week. And it's really free form. We talk about a lot of stuff. And sometimes someone will say, like, I'm not entirely sure what that actor was, or if it was this year, or all kinds of data that may or may not be accurate in the moment. And instead of stopping the show dead and having us Google it and make typing noises and create an editing nightmare, I just say, you know what? when we get to the end of the show, when I'm doing my editing and I've listened to it all, I'll write down any questions that we make and I'll look them up. I'll do some research. I'll get the viewers the answers. So, for example, in this, I said I wasn't sure what year Over the Garden Wall came out. Bush League. I should have at least known that, right? Well, I did say that I thought it was 2014. It was 2014. I was just being unsure of myself. But then I did say I didn't know when Tome, as in book, not tomb as in grave, of the unknown, the short film that this kind of got started as, came out, and I thought it was 2009. It was 2013. The whole concept was conceived in 2004 and pitched to Cartoon Network in 2006. The short gets made in 2013, and Over the Garden Wall comes out in 2014. There's your timeline correctly for you. Other things that I said in the show that I wasn't entirely sure of, I didn't remember the name of the lounge singer, the pop singer from American Hustle, the scene that I was in, who also voices the frog that Wirt has, who has many, many names. And that was Jack Jones. Now, if you're not familiar with Jack Jones, you probably are, you just don't know his name. He sang such songs as Call Me Irresponsible, Dream the Impossible Dream, and to a lesser degree, the theme song to Love Boat. So you probably have him in your DNA, you just didn't know that you did. Here he, again, voices Wirt and sings voices the frog that Wirt has, and then sings when that frog sings in that particular episode. He also sings in American Hustle, so weird deja vu happening for really just me and the other 100 people who were on set that day and many days. And now I'm just going to expand on some of the stuff that I said to give you some additional interesting trivia. Normally I try and lace this into part one, and sometimes I just don't. It doesn't fit into the conversation, and so I put it in the back end because I think it's really fascinating, and some of this stuff is wicked tangential. Like, for example, by the time we get to the end of this very first fact, we'll be talking about the television miniseries Roots. Now let's go. This show was pitched as first a short film, and then there was the thought that they might make it into an actual television series, and it was going to be 18 episodes long. Well, that's not what we wound up with. They decided instead to go with 8 and make it a mini series because they thought that it could do better quality focusing in on 8 shorter stories than trying to do an 18 episode television arc. In fact, there was a point in time when they thought that this would be specifically a Halloween special, which I did say it feels like, and it winds up being a Halloween special. That's because there was a moment where it was almost exactly that, except that creator-writer Patrick McHale felt that he couldn't create an overarching connective storyline that really was like big Halloween message. He just had a different story to tell. It's just also set on Halloween. In fact, there was a point in time where they thought that the boys would go out in the accident on Halloween, and when they woke up, it would actually be Christmas. It would be that much longer, but probably some traumatic brain injury there, so they didn't wind up doing this. This is the first miniseries for Cartoon Network. Pretty interesting. They actually only wind up having 5 miniseries ever in their history, and I'm going to have to look down at this piece of paper to tell you the names of all 5. Obviously, this is one, Over the Garden Wall. Then there's also Long Live the Royals. Haven't seen it. Steven Universe Future. Aquaman, King of Atlantis. And Adventure Time Distant Lands. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what was the first ever miniseries that we had in the United States? The answer? The Blue Knight. I had never heard of this. It's a police detective story about a guy who is 4 days from retirement, and he finds out about a murder, and he has to solve it before he retires. And it's 4 hours long, and they aired it in 4 parts with 1 hour each, each day consecutively. And it starred William Holden, not the character from Catcher in the Rye. That's William Holden Caulfield. William Holden, the actor from Sunset Boulevard or Network, which we did that great episode on with Conan Neutron. So if you want to talk more about William Holden, go check out that particular episode. The interesting thing for me when I think about miniseries is actually the fate of the miniseries Roots, which aired in the United States in January of 1977. It's a wonderful movie, and if you have not seen it, I cannot stress enough how much you should see it. It is incredibly important in television series. Oh my God, I have to cut here because there is a cat at the door. I had to cut there because my cat Sigmar has taken his toy, who we call Lieutenant Dan. It's a dragonfly he's torn the legs off of, and it jingles, and he was shoving it under the door so much that that audio is not really going to be used. So getting back into it, Roots, the television miniseries, which is a very dramatic and earnest look at slavery in the United States. It's graphic, it's violent, it is not intended to be pleasant. And network executives were really worried that it might not do very well. So they thought the best way to deal with this, as most network executives do because they don't have decent thoughts, in my opinion, hot take, so brave, they tried to bury it by airing it consecutively. They just slammed all the episodes out in 6 nights, and I thought that would be fine. No one would really notice. The result wound up creating one of the most watched television events ever. Well, second, technically. 100 million people watched, and that's just about half of the people in the United States, watched the finale, making it at the time the most watched single episode of television ever. This would wind up, obviously, I'm sure my trivia TV nerds are already screaming at me. This would wind up being topped in 1983 when Goodbye, Farewell, Amen, the final episode of MASH would air. That would have like 105 million people watch that. That's just so many people wound up watching that. And that is now the one that has the history of most watched single episode of any television on air date in the United States. I just think it's really interesting, some trivia that gets kind of torn up and eaten into this concept of the television miniseries in the United States, which harkens way back to radio dramas, which would do this kind of serial storytelling weeks after weeks. Interestingly enough, when Roots finally did air in the BBC, they did not air it consecutively. They aired it over 3 nights, the first 3 hours. Then they took a 3-day break and aired the remaining 3 every Sunday for like the next 3 weeks. So they really tweaked it out over there, which wound up, not being quite as effective. Come Wayward Souls, which is a song that you'll hear in the series a couple different times, is set to a tune that you might find familiar, but you might not recognize. It is actually Oh Holy Night. Give it another listen. I can't include it here for copyright reasons. Get flagged, but if you give it a listen, you might recognize it. I spoke about the very many names that Greg's frog has, and I got a list of them, and I thought I'd give them to you right now. Another really fun fact is that the way that they spell his name when the frog's name is Jason Funderburker is different than the actual spelling of Funderburger in in the like notes of who plays who, which is just, they said that they did that to avoid confusion. It's still pronounced exactly the same. It's just spelled differently, which I think is adorable. Other names that they had for the frog were Kitty, Wirt Jr., George Washington, Mr. President, Benjamin Franklin, Dr. Cucumber, Greg Jr., Skipper, Ronald, and like I said earlier, Jason Thunderberger. Side note, the character design for that character, which literally gives me a full body ick. I don't like that much vocal fry. The creator said that he based that on himself, Patrick McHale. So bless. In the episode where they have Mrs. Langtree and you could see Tom Lennon's voice and they teach all the little animals to play instruments and you get potatoes and molasses, the song, it really seemed like Mrs. Langtree's lover had been away for a really, really long time. It seemed like Jimmy Brown had been away for maybe months. If you listen to the song Langtree's Lament, which is included in the soundtrack but not in that particular episode, it's 3 days. She says that it's 3 days, but it feels like 8. just some coloratura to pepper in for you. I said that Elijah Wood can kind of just choose to do whatever he wants, and he has some really insane choices. I recently found out that he voiced a character in the original Red v. Blue series, which is a really weird series that aired on, like the internet. It wasn't a television series. They did make it into a television series later on that totally sucked. I'm talking about the crazy, like, Puma, a warthog, series, the original one. Elijah Wood voices Meta, the rogue AI agent that is basically always on fire. How can you dislike him? I love all of his choices. No notes. I said that I was a little surprised that this is considered a comedy fantasy. And then I realized I should have connected that to my previous comments about it obviously being Dante's Inferno. Because what is the other title for Dante's Inferno but the Divine Comedy? A protagonist journeys through the unknown. Yeah, it wasn't a particular, I mean, it was funny if you got politics in the time. It's humorous, like we remember it for the weird, dark, crazy bits, which this kind of has as well. So it is a little bit of a divine comedy. Fun little side story. I once had one of the most frustrating experiences of my life trying to get a copy of Dante's Inferno from a Barnes & Noble. I'll paint you a little picture. I'm like 17, 16, whatever. I go into a Barnes & Noble near where I live, and I'm unsure of how to navigate where to find this book because I've checked the classics section. I don't seem to see it, but it feels like a book that every bookstore would probably have a copy of, so maybe I'm just looking in the wrong place. I go to the middle kiosk, and I flag down the attendant, and I ask them, do you have a copy of Dante's Inferno? And they say to me, is that a new book? Because we don't get those in right away. Not wanting to judge, but realizing that I'm dealing with more than I knew from a person who works in the bookstore. I said, nah, it's really wicked old. Most bookstores have it. You probably have a copy of it. Just do me a favor and check it out. She goes, who's it by? Dante. Oh. And then she says the sentence that gave me the most, to this day, I did not know. I was struck dumb by this, and I did not know how to respond. We don't have a copy of that, but we do have several copies of Dante's Peak starring Pierce Brosnan. I just what a cool side fact to know. It's obviously she didn't think it was the movie version of the other thing. It just also had Dante in it, and maybe if I was interested in his Inferno, I might be interested in his Peak. So I just thanked her for her time, and I left, and I got a copy of it from the library. Just go to the library. Librarians know what you're looking for. It's much easier. Did you know that you can listen to what is on the mixtape that were made for Sarah? Yeah. They actually made it. You could even purchase it. There were a limited number of them made that looked exactly like they do in the movie. And show. I have a real weak spot for ephemera that looks like and existed in a fictional universe. So, like, a mug that says Kobayashi on the bottom, and like I'm allowed to break it on the floor, or like the T-shirt that a character wears in Stranger Things. Like, not a shirt for the movie, but a shirt or an object or a thing that existed in the fictional universe. So, really exciting. You can't really get copies of that because they were very limited, and that was a while ago that came out, and they're a little expensive if you can find them. Bless you if you can. Go ahead and get them. There is a SoundCloud out there with just the actual music. So if you want to listen to what was on the tape without actually owning and holding the physical tape, you can do that. And I'll include it in the notes here. So there'll be a link to it for you to enjoy. There's a really interesting similarity between the end credit music, which you hear at the end of every single episode, and a piece of music that I did my first ever aerial performance to, because it's a piece of music I absolutely adore. The end music for Over the Garden Wall is called Black Train, or End Credit. And the piece of music that I'm talking about is Gnossienne Number 1 by Eric Satie. Again, this might be something that you're like, que es esto? You can look it up. You'll hear like the first 4 notes, and you'll get a frise on your arm. Your whole body will be like, ah, that song, because it is used in like over 40 different movies, television shows. It is a piece of music, classical music played on the piano that does not have lyrics to it. That's why you're probably like, I don't think I know this piece. I'm going to read you a list of just some of the notable things that from television and movies have used Gnossienne. Number 1. There's multiple Gnossiennes. Just number 1. It has been used in The Queen's Gambit, The Simpsons, The Walking Dead, My Dinner with Andre, The Fableman, Being There, Man on Wire, The Royal Tenenbaums, About Schmidt, Chocolat, Star Trek Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 2, Where Silence Has Lease, The X-Files, Season 2, Episode 13, Irresistible, What Lies Beneath, The Holdovers, Hugo, and more. I'm just going to stop there because I've already said a ton of them. This piece of music is called Gnossienne. You might be thinking, what is that? How do I spell that? You don't need to know how to spell it. It's really hard to spell. It starts with a G, like gnocchi. It does not start, or really, it's French, so it's going to have a lot of secret letters in it. But it is a word that existed before it was used by Satie. If you look it up, the dictionary defines it as the dance that Thebes did upon defeating the Minotaur. I didn't know he did a little like victory dance. And I didn't know we had a word for that. And now you know, little rainbow. Why is this important? Well, Thebes, son of Poseidon, we've got a water theme in there as well, had a whole hero's journey. All of the stories about his friends, his life, his experience wind up being a huge part of storytelling throughout time and have like a vignette characteristic to it, which is very similar to what we have here. He's also considered a divine hero. We have the Divine Comedy, which has Virgil as the divine hero. So yet again, we're getting this, every single episode ends with this reminder of the Inferno, storytelling that goes back through time, this older kind of, it's dark, but it's compelling, but it's also realistic, but it's also whimsical, but it's also sweet, like deep in our bones storytelling. And I really love that. There's a reason we use Gnossienne all the time. And there's a reason why each episode ends with this somewhat homage piece with a very strange tempo to it that is not, it's a little arrhythmical. It's very notable. It's very kind of sad and speaking, but also whimsical. It's a joy. I absolutely love it. And I encourage you to check out the other piece and compare the two. And if you have any thoughts, throw it in the comments. I'd love to hear. And guys, that is it. That is absolutely it for the entire show. I kept it kind of short for YouTube to give you the basic premise of what this is like, except that normally it includes another person that I'm talking to, and we play this game, and it's kind of a vibe and a hangout and a real conversation, and we can get down some crazy rabbit holes, and I can go a little nuts on the trivia on the back end to bring you some weird fun facts. So if you enjoyed this a little amuse-bouche of what if I don't like it is like, please check out the other episodes. They don't have my visage, but they do have my voice, and they have all this content amped up even more. As I move into my season 2 of the show, I will start to include visuals, but in season 1, I had a lot of guests that are not professional podcasters. They're not actor forward, but they are great conversationalists. And so I wanted to encourage them to get in front of a microphone before they got in front of a camera. And now I'm in front of both for you. If you like this, please subscribe to my channel. Please subscribe to Movie Night Extravaganza. Please follow me on TikTok at Movie Runtime, on Instagram at Little Deadly Creature. Go to the links that are included below. Do all that wonderful supportive stuff. I would absolutely appreciate it. Although honestly, if you made it to the end of this episode and you just listened and you had a little fun and I kept you some company while you were doing a task, maybe the dishes, folding laundry, at work, driving somewhere, that's really awesome too. And that's more than enough for me. Thank you so much for making it to this point. I hope you're having a wonderful day.